I was telling someone, the first thing you do on a stage is make an ass of yourself. It gets easy all the way. Mary was devastated when she arrived into my coaching sphere. She was devastated because for 15 years she had been a very well-rated leader and manager, and they just reorganized, and not only was she passed over, she was set aside. And she went to her boss, one of 3 successive bosses who had all said she was great, said, "Why didn't I get used in this reorg?" And he proceeded to tell her that she had never actually been a very good leader or manager. That's why she was devastated. She also felt betrayed, and this is a quote, "I will never trust those bastards again." That tells you how deeply she felt that. We were able to put her on a new trajectory. Good outcome. 10 years later, she just recently retired with that entirely different path, so it ended well for her. But too often it doesn't. And there's an underlying reason for this. Here's the issue. Tell me the truth. Not really. I don't want to hear that. And please do not hurt me. You see, that's the cultural norm. So when we give or receive feedback, that's our starting place. That sets us up for what we call a one-down situation because it doesn't get better with that. So we got to find a way to work with that with feedback. Before I jump into that, let me point to your attention. In the handout, there's a 2-page toolkit, which is a variation on what you're going to see here. I've written that specifically as a toolkit for you. It's on page 2 and page 3. You'll see the pieces of this in a different order. Feel free to keep notes there because I want you to walk out of here with something you can use. But before we jump into feedback, let's do this. Let's talk about the role of the leader. It's simple. Set and communicate direction. Make sure you got the right people to get there. Build a culture, the ecological model, for those of you who know that. So those good people can get where they're supposed to get. That's your job. Now the problem is most of us get promoted or move up to manager or leader because we're really good doers. Do you see the word doer up there anywhere? Big transition. In all the places you manage and lead is you have to become, literal language out of our club mission statement, the empowerer of others, and this is how we do that. So feedback needs to be like that. Let me tell you now about the attributes of feedback, and you're going to see some nice connections here to what you've heard earlier today. The first one is this. It has to be consistent to values and principles. For me as the receiver, and for you as the giver. You can't be a chameleon on either side of this deal. Has to be consistent with whatever the values are. That means I have to think about mine and yours. In addition, it needs to be aligned to the setting we're in and the circumstances we face. Feedback that's not relevant to where you are trying to learn and grow is really not very helpful. It's easy, but it's not helpful. Third, and another callback here, it's got to be true to the nature of who we are, our strengths, our style. That's where we get, number 5, the magic sweet spot, which is built-in strengths, which is exactly what we saw Renisha pointing us to. In fact, what the research in this area shows is much of the feedback needs to be how you get more out of your strengths, not developing your weaknesses. It's a game changer. And we mitigate weaknesses, of course, but we don't focus on them because that's not your sweet spot. So this is what I call the characteristics of effective feedback, which you can use to think about how you give and receive feedback. However, I have bad news. The research does not show that you can be effective giving feedback until you have learned how to receive it. Ouch. Yeah. I can't teach it if I haven't received it. I can't give it if I haven't received it. So my first job as someone who wants to learn how to give effective feedback is not practicing giving feedback. It's practicing receiving feedback. And if you've observed, lots of you know that's very, very hard to do because we want to respond to it all. Anybody know that? You get feedback, it's like, well, wait, let me explain. Like, no, take the feedback. Internalize it. So this is our starting point. You got to receive it to get it. And if you're not comfortable receiving it, that's where you start. There is one essential principle that I have talked to all of my clients about. It is at the root of almost every leader I've ever worked with who's run off the rails. They don't have someone who will tell them the truth. Preferably someone's. It's not unique to here, it's not unique to anywhere. Mostly people will tell us things they think will score some points, move some things forward, make everybody feel good. They will not tell you oftentimes what you need to hear. So I ask leaders, who's that person or persons who are going to tell you the truth? Because you can't learn and grow without someone telling you the truth. Truth should make you wince. The game changers should be uncomfortable because they're game changers. They're screwing with your ego, your sense of yourself. It's that feedback that says, oh, you thought you had that value? Well, let me tell you what we're experiencing. You think you got that straight? Oh, dude, no. What, you mean I've been a fraud my whole life? Sometimes, yes. Which means we got to have some trust here. So if you don't have someone somewhere who's telling you the truth, if all they're telling you, Kari, is how wonderful you are, you need to find some new feedbackers. That is actually not a word, but it works really well. So, let's be real practical. How do we put feedback to work? This is a really cool formula. First thing, we got to find a way to get it from head to heart. It's only 18 inches, but it's actually miles. We need some kind of a practice, some kind of a journal practice, somebody to work with, someone to help us ask questions, to digest, to take data and turn it into understanding. Data in changes nothing. It has to get from head to heart. I have to find a way to do something reflective to get it in there. Then what I've got to do is turn it into a proposed action path. Feedback without action is useless. Here's a formula. Set some objectives for yourself. A few. Really clear objectives that put that feedback into practice in some way. Now you get to be bold with step 3. You go back to the people who gave you the feedback and you ask them, will this get it done? And then you shut your mouth and breathe as they tell you the truth some more, and it changes what you think you need to do because you probably gamed it for yourself. Because you're a human being. That's what we do. Step 4. You click again. Step 4. Go to one of those trusted advisors and say, how can I use these now to stretch myself? The research in goals is very, very clear. It's uncontrovertible. If you stretch, you'll get more results than if you don't. It's that simple. Use your trusted confidants to stretch you, to push you, to take you someplace where you would never have thought to go in the first place, and revise everything again. And then put some accountability into place. This is reflected in the toolkit. This is a framework you can use to take feedback and put it to good use. So that's a really, really practical part. Here's the second essential principle. You all know Pema Chodron? Yeah, great Buddhist teacher. I'm not a Buddhist, but I love Pema. Lean into the sharp points. Because nothing good is coming without some sharp points being impaling you. That's how the change comes. A friend of mine, Jim P., guy from recovery. A lot of you know I'm in recovery from alcoholism, have been for 34 years recently. He survived D-Day. Yeah, and it's an awful, wonderful, magical story. Cuddle up to your fears and your pains, make friends with them, see what they have to teach you, lean into them. So let me tell you the hardest feedback I ever heard. Some of you know I had a mentor for a number of years, 28 years actually, Sam. And one day, many years ago, Sam said, Ron, can we talk? Now, of course I want to say yes, but I'm thinking, uh-oh. And Sam says, you leave carnage behind you. Did you feel that? Yeah. And I think I said, but, and he said, no, Ron, you leave carnage behind you. Because you're like a heat-seeking missile. You get your eyes on something and off you go, and actually people become incidental to you. I got a social work master's degree. I practice the social work value sets. That was awful feedback. And it broke me wide open. I was not who I thought I was. I had values, to the earlier points, and they weren't what was being practiced. What was being practiced was my egoic pursuit of results and success, sometimes at the cost of others. So what Sam said, and some of you know this because you've been on the receiving end of his advice to me. You didn't know that. Maybe you did. Sam said, Ron, we can't change your nature, but I suggest you learn how to go back and make reparations. You learn how to always look over your shoulder and go back and find out whose toes you stepped on, whose shins you kicked, whose feelings you hurt, those people that you discarded along the way because they weren't of service to you in that moment when you were a heat-seeking missile. And I do it to this day. That was advice given 20 years ago. And I will tell you that I've had to apologize multiple times to Gail, who has been totally in charge and highly effective in what she's been doing here, curating this whole event, because sometimes I just can't, like a bulldog, I can't get that bone out of my mouth. And I've had to make that right. At least a handful of times, if not more. It's part of my practice now to remediate who I am. So that's what we're talking about the kind of stuff that like changes your game, right? So there's another principle here. Here's what the research says. Feedback should be 7-to-1 positive experience. That doesn't mean whitewash. It means you got a way, to quote Socrates, of being true to yourself and to the message, finding a way to be sure it's necessary to be said, and being kind, no matter what you have to say. 7-to-1. Now, child psychology says it's 17-to-1, and many of us are a lot more like children than we would like to admit. Which means we need a lot of positive experiences, but not at the expense of telling the truth. Not at the expense of telling the truth. So how do we become people who can give and receive feedback in an extraordinarily positive way so that people benefit from it, and we do too? So those are 3 essential principles. Let's talk about coaching for a second. Many of you know I'm a zealot for coaching, and here's why. Did you know you're egocentric? Michelle, did you know that when you give advice to other people, you're actually probably giving advice so I will become more like you? Yep, that's right. That's not helpful. What we're looking for is for me to become more thoroughly me. There's the challenge. Here's why I care about coaching. Coaching is about the recipient, not some standard. Evaluation, much as I love it, is about some set of standards, some set of guides, some set of practices or principles. Coaching is about you. It forces me out of me and into you. Thinking about you and what you need. Trying to be true to myself while being true to you. So I'd like to challenge you in this area because it's so embedded in our culture. Happens all the time. So it's a whole different standard. Okay, let's just walk you through a quick framework here. This is also in the handout. Here's where we start. You fall off the stage first. If you didn't see that stumble, I almost toppled over. It's because I looked up and fell. Okay, find yourself someone. Find yourself someone to help you. 2, use some kind of process that focuses on your values and strengths. Don't care what process you use, find one. There's a couple tool recommendations, some materials recommended in the toolkit. Number 3, make sure you characterize those upsides and opportunities. Focus on the good stuff and mitigate the stuff that doesn't serve you so well. Select an instrument that suits you well. Follow the tips for putting it into practice, which is what we just did. So formula, it's in the toolkit. You can work with that. Here's what I like to do now. Renisha volunteered, well, actually, I asked Renisha if she would be willing for some leadership feedback, and she said yes, and she said she'd come up on the stage. Please give her big applause. No handshake would do. So here's what I see about you as a leader, Renisha. I've been watching you for a while, I told you that. There are two words that fit you so well. One is enthusiasm. Got it? Enthusiasm means entheos, of God. To be enthused is to be filled with the Spirit. It is you. So too is delightfulness, to be filled with light. I was watching you, were just beaming it out there. Now what's valuable about that as a leader is how it affects people. See, I feel it right here as inspiration. I'm called to you. It literally, it's like, almost have to breathe to do it. That's the effect you have on me using those. And it is such a sweet spot. The other thing you do extraordinarily well, this whole presentation Renisha did was like this. She connects the dots so we can follow her. Do you see that? All those slides, dot, 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 dot. Brilliantly done. Excellent. It will bring people along. You inspire them, you connect the dots. Here's the challenge. You, like many of us, fall prey to thinking motivation is sufficient. It's been happening all day here. Motivate, inspire, call them up. The problem is people leave here inspired and then they run into the real world. So my challenge to you is to add to your portfolio things that allow you to help them through the swamp. Inspire them, give them tools to get through the swamp, they'll be better led. And then to close the deal, bring us your heart. Because it is a beautiful thing. Now, I asked Renisha to be prepared for 30 seconds to respond to that feedback to you.
Fellow Toastmasters, thank you, Ron Chapman, for giving us the power of feedback. And I volunteered to do this because I wanted to make myself vulnerable, and I also wanted to receive something in real time. Perhaps I would run into one of you a little bit later and say, oh yeah, by the way, that was a good speech. But then my mind would be left wondering what was good about it. And if you saw opportunities, what were the opportunities? I am going to feed that in my knowledge and my skill, use this as the hard data. And what I love about what Ron did, I think I said this to you on a conference call once, thank you for getting me. He's practicing what he's preaching, not giving the feedback so that I become a Ron, but he has seen what does Renisha embody and what can we do to get a stronger Renisha. And to that I say thank you very much.
I kiss her, but she's engaged. By the way, the hugs are part of the positivity. Handshakes were wonderful, but that was a pretty intimate thing we just did. And thank you, Renisha, for being willing. That says a lot about you. Here's the last piece. The research is very clear. If you lose your way, you will fall. What happens is we have egos, we show up, we have values, we have strengths, and before long, all this applause causes us to start thinking it's about us. It's not. It's not about the leader. It's about the leading, which is not you. It's what pours through you. If you're an open conduit, the leading pours through you. It's not yours to claim. That's the egoic mischief. And the applause and the standing ovations and all that stuff make me think I am so special. Which means I got to knock myself, I've got to puncture myself, I've got to throw myself off any pedestal that is created underneath me. Because what the research shows is you will start making bad decisions inconsistent with who you are. And I've been studying it for years. It's the root of how leaders end up in prison and in all kinds of dire straits. I would not wish that for you. So do your own inner work. Because the world needs who you are.